taking a look at each individual position group, where you stand in that room, and you start with the quarterback position. And, I don't think there has ever been more hype and excitement around a single player in Starkville who has yet to become a full-time starter than there is around Kamario Taylor right now. And I know he got a couple starts at the end of last season, but going into the year knowing he's the guy, there was a lot of excitement around Dak, obviously going from 2013 to 2014. But at that point, Dak had started like half of the 2013 season as it is. Obviously, we knew what we were getting with him. We didn't see him taking the step forward that he did, and it ended up being an awesome year. Will in the chat. Yo, what's up, Will? Glad to have you here. Ended up being a huge year, but you kind of knew what you were getting with Dak Prescott at that point. And we know a little bit of what we're getting with Kamario Taylor, but there's still this almost lore around him at this point, because you're talking about a guy that is the highest rated quarterback signee in program history. And on top of that, he's a Mississippi State guy through and through. Omar Connor's nephew, grew up 30 minutes down the road playing for Noxubee County in Macon. A guy who committed to Mississippi State early on before Jeff Lebby was the coach, stayed on with Jeff Lebby despite Georgia, Texas A&M pushing for him, wanted to be a Bulldog, an Elite 11 finalist, a guy that some services, I think On3 came close to giving him a 5th star. Didn't quite get there, but they had him at one point as the number 30 prospect in the country by their own metrics. And I know they ended up pushing him down when it was all said and done. But both On3 and 247 take the approach of, if you're a top 32 player in the country, you're a 5-star by their metrics. And again, I know he didn't finish there, ends up being the consensus 4-star player that he was. State's never had a guy like that come onto campus. And you saw it in the spring. It's just different. State's had the 4 stars in the past. They've signed quite a few 4-star quarterbacks over the years. Almost all of them have been guys that you look at and like, yeah, very talented, could play early, could contribute early, but probably a guy that's a few years away from being a real high-level player within the SEC. And not to put those expectations on Kamario. Kamario comes in with a talent profile that kind of does put those expectations on, that if he hits that ceiling, you're talking about a guy that could be one of the top quarterbacks in the SEC and one of the top quarterbacks in college football. A guy who is 6'4", 230 pounds, that has the arm strength that he does, with the flick of the wrist, launching at 50 yards downfield, flat-footed. The athleticism that he does, where it's the combination of breakaway speed in the open field, power to run between the tackles and breaking through contact, and then also the elusiveness to make guys miss, both in terms of avoiding pressure, avoiding tacklers in the open field. I have not seen State have a quarterback move like that. Andre Ware in the bowl game made the comparison to Vince Young, which Vince Young's before my time. So I didn't see Vince Young in college. I've seen the highlights. And obviously I know the type of player that he was. Like that's rare air. For me, kind of reminiscent a little bit of like a Lamar Jackson in terms of the way he moves in the open field, but he also has a power that I think Lamar doesn't have. I don't want to throw around the Cam Newton comparison to this point, but in terms of a guy who had the all-around skill set, I mean, the way Kamario runs, you could probably compare a little bit to Cam, but he might even be a little bit more elusive than Cam. Like Cam had legit speed, but Cam was also more of a power runner. For guys at Mississippi State, Dak and Fitz were more power runners. Now, Fitz early in his year obviously we saw the long touchdown runs that he had at State, which he kind of lost that after the injury. But he was still a little bit more power. And he also wasn't a make-you-miss quarterback. He was sort of going to run you over. Kamario does a little bit of all. And I don't want to just focus on the running element of all of it, because the passing element you think has the ability to be there too. He throws it on a rope. And when he is in rhythm, can just set fire, throw to my first read, it's there. Which for a guy of his age, as a true freshman coming in last season, that's kind of the expectation. You're not necessarily expecting a ton of big boy quarterbacking in the pocket, which I think he does have the ability to do. And he has shown the ability to work through his reads, get through his checkdowns. Definitely has to work on that accuracy. That's something that's going to come with more time, come with more reps in that short to intermediate part of the field. But he has the ability to hit every throw that he's going to be asked to hit within this offense. He has the arm strength and arm talent to hit any throw you could ask of him if he can get the accuracy part of it down, but that's going to come. And I know I'm talking a little bit as if we haven't seen this guy. We've now seen him in multiple games for Mississippi State. We've seen him get extensive playing time. I guess it would average out to about 4 games worth of action if you put it all together for him. Getting maybe 3.5. Heavy work in the second half against Arkansas, heavy work in the second half against Georgia, good bit of action against Missouri, and then obviously getting the starts against Ole Miss and Wake Forest in the bowl game. And I was going to say playing the entirety. Obviously, he went down. You had Luke Kromenhoek come in for a bit against Wake Forest. This chair keeps hitting against this wall, and it's annoying the crap out of me. We've seen it, but what does he look like when he goes through an entire offseason as the guy for Mississippi State at quarterback? That's where there's so much excitement that he gets this whole offseason to work with these guys as QB1. And he's got that year under his belt. And now it's like, okay, you can fully unleash the talent that is Kamario Taylor. You have fully built the offense around him. Whatever Jeff Lebby plans schematically this year as the basis of his offense, Kamario Taylor is the focal point of that. Obviously, they had a package for Kamario, and I'm sure they expounded upon that package when he became a starter in the Egg Bowl and in the bowl game. But in terms of going through, okay, what is our offseason install? What are we putting in? And the base offense is not going to change, but how they structure things entirely, there's stuff that they were repping for Blake Shapen that they're not going to be repping for Kamario Taylor and vice versa. It is all geared towards he is QB1. We are building this thing around him. So there's a lot of excitement around the opportunity there. Now, of course, it comes down to the pieces you put around him, and it comes down to his maturation as well and his development. And how much of that does he show over the course of the offseason going into next year? But there's some really high potential. And the reason there is this hype and excitement, everything from highest rated QB we've had, he is a lifelong Bulldog, all of that wonderful stuff. State's never had a quarterback like this. They've never had a guy that you look at and say, if he hits his talent ceiling, he will be one of the very best quarterbacks in college football. Dak became a guy like that. Dak became a great college QB and all SEC, all American caliber college quarterback. Dak Prescott became that. Dak Prescott was also a low 3-star coming out of high school in Houghton, Louisiana, that other programs, notably LSU, thought should be playing tight end at the next level. That Dan Mullen looked at and said, I can make that guy work, and we can develop and coach him up. And you saw Dak's development year after year after year. And, Dak did not play as a true freshman in 2011. Took his red shirt, and that was also before red shirts could get on the field. Then in 2012, he kind of became what you saw with Kamario this year as that package quarterback as a redshirt freshman where 3rd and short, 4th and short, goal line, will put Dak in for a few plays, let him plunge ahead. And he showed some flashes there. You saw, okay, this guy could be something. He didn't show you anything in that redshirt freshman season to make you think this guy is the future face of Bulldog football. It's, hey, this guy could be the quarterback down the line. Obviously, 2013, he gets thrust into action very early with Tyler Russell getting injured. And he kind of showed, okay, he's taking a big step forward. Like, this guy's a gamer. This guy's a playmaker. And he is a leader and ends up taking over that team. And then you see the step forward to 2014, 2015, the further maturation. It was a process with Dak. There's going to be a process with Kamario Taylor. I'm not suggesting that he is anywhere near a finished product, but what I'm saying is that the Kamario Taylor you see on the field right now is ahead of where Dak Prescott was to that point. Granted, State's had other quarterbacks come in that were technically ahead of Dak to that point and didn't amount to anything. But those guys weren't getting on the field the way the Kamario was. So you've got quite the talent ceiling that if he is able to hit upon that, you're going to see something special. And that gives you a ton of excitement about what this quarterback room looks like. And it gives you a ton of excitement going into spring, especially that it appears that the procedure that he had to have done after the bowl game, thank God you avoid serious injury in that bowl game. He's come out of it. I know they just did the video of him and his brother, which, that's cool that he gets to play with his brother now. Walking across the field. Looks like he's walking fine. I don't know if he started to partake in any sort of workouts or anything to this point, but he's going to be full go for spring. He's going to get these spring practices. And I'm hoping, spring game, if I can be in attendance, I'll be in attendance. But I would love for this thing to be televised so that we can have it on tape and have a full record of like Kamario Taylor as MSU's QB in the spring. What does that look like? How much further along has he come just in these last few months? Which I guess, look, rehabbing from again that surgery. Maybe he hasn't gotten to take too big of a step forward, but it's more reps. It's more time in the offense for him. And what does he do throughout the spring in the 15 practices leading up to the spring game? There's going to be a lot of excitement to get to see that. And I've kind of done a full breakdown here as if we're going into the season, but it's going to be really fun to look at this QB room knowing you've got a guy that if he hits his potential could be one of the SEC's best. And I know various quarterback rankings have come out. SEC Unfiltered put out theirs. SEC Mike put out his. And Kamario's kind of been ranking outside the top 10, and State fans have taken issue with that. I personally don't have a problem with it just because I understand he is still largely an unknown commodity. We've seen a couple games. We know what the ceiling is. If you don't want to put him ahead of guys who are more established players in the SEC, I don't have an issue with that. But I think of the teams where it's going to be a new starter, I think you've got to put him up at the top of that list, in my opinion. I guess somebody may argue like an Austin Simmons going to Missouri, where he is at is similar to, or where Kamario is at is similar to where Austin Simmons was going into this past season. So you could argue those one way or another. I know there's all sort of hype around Keelan Russell. If he is going to be the guy at Alabama, what could he be? But, whoever's stepping in at Tennessee, whoever's Kenny Minchie at Kentucky, I don't think you can put those guys ahead of Kamario Taylor to this point. And the ceiling, again, is there for Taylor that if we end the year and he's a top 5 quarterback in the SEC, I don't think any of us are surprised. Was that the ankle surgery? Yeah, so he did have to undergo, and I'm sorry, I am going to adjust this chair briefly. He did have to undergo a minor procedure for the injury, lower leg, whatever it was specifically. But it was nothing serious. It was something they knew they'd be able to handle, and it wouldn't be a long recovery. And sure enough, the expectation is that he's going to be full go for spring. And I think he's going to be ready to go whenever they start spring practice here in the next couple of weeks. I think the date was around like March 17th was when I know Thunder and Lightning, I guess they had somebody source them on, it was probably going to be March 17th starting. So about a month out until spring practice. He should be fully ready to go at that point. But yeah, the ceiling is there for State to have one of the top quarterbacks in the conference. And that's a great place to be because of, can he carry the offense? And look, that's a lot to put on the plate of a young guy. And I do think it's worth noting, look, you've had quarterbacks in the recent years in the SEC in Nico Iamaleava and Jackson Arnold, who were these high-profile QBs coming out of high school as true freshmen, got on the field, made starts, showed a lot of flashes that had people going into the next season saying, that guy is one of the very best quarterbacks in the SEC. Football season arrives and it didn't pan out for him. They didn't have the year that they wanted to have. Those guys with higher talent profiles coming out than what Kamario had. And both of those guys, for what it's worth, in this offensive system that you were running under Jeff Lebby. So you don't want to put too much on his plate. I'm also not saying that he's going to flop in the way that those guys are. You don't want to put too much on his plate, though. You want to understand, you've got to put the right pieces around. Because part of the problem, Nico, I can't say much. He had a 1,500-yard rusher alongside him, and their receiving talent was not great. And also, I think Heupel didn't do enough for them offensively with the way he called it that year. But Nico also just missed a lot. He also had a great defense. He wasn't like he was having to lift up the defense. Arnold, he also had a great defense. Arnold had 0 weapons and 0 offensive line. He was kind of destined to fail, and Seth Luttrell as a play caller just did him no favors at all. Obviously, we've now seen since that Arnold has his own problems even further as a QB, but I think with Jeff Lebby and a healthier offensive line running things in 2024 at Oklahoma, maybe Arnold has a better year. To that point, State's got to get offensive line figured out. If you don't put the protection in front of him, what is it going to be? I think they've got the skill talent. I think the receiving core is there for him to have plenty of weapons to thrive. Ant Evans coming back is huge. Getting Marquise Johnson out of Missouri, I think, is huge. Can Zion Ragens take a step forward? I think Frisco McGee is a guy people are very excited for after what he showed in the bowl game. Does Aiden Williams finally put it together? You've got some pieces there in the receiving core. You have Fluff Bothwell coming back. And I think that's a good compliment in the run game and a couple other younger guys that are very talented as well. It's all going to come down to offensive line. Can you protect him? And if you can protect him, he's got to have a chance to have a really, really big year. Elsewhere in the quarterback room, this is a pretty well-rounded room as a whole because you bring in 2 transfers to give you a couple options at depth in the room. Notably, A.J. Swan coming over from Vanderbilt, a guy that coming from App State, started his career at Vanderbilt, has a lot of experience in the SEC, spent 3 seasons as an SEC quarterback, 2 at Vanderbilt, 1 at LSU. Now, didn't play when he was in Baton Rouge, maybe got in a couple games for a few snaps, but largely did not play. Spent 2 years at Vanderbilt, mostly as the starter. I know he battled injuries, but I believe his second year there, every game he was healthy, he was the starter. And look, was an up-and-down player, was not a guy who was a great SEC quarterback or great college quarterback, but had some big performances for Vanderbilt as well. Had some times where he played well enough to show you some flashes. And now, coming off a year at App State where, again, was up and down, did not have the type of year that he would have liked, got injured again, but still showed some of those flashes. And the big thing with Swan is you've got the in-game experience. He has been around college football. He has gone and played in difficult environments. He has gone up against SEC defenses before. He's played a lot of football. If something happens and you have to go to a backup quarterback for whatever reason, having a guy who has been there and done that, I think, is the best thing you could have asked for. We talked about this a lot with Mississippi State when it came to what were they going to be looking for in the QB room, in the portal. You knew your options were going to be limited. You were not going to go out and get a guy with a super high talent ceiling. I guess we'll talk about Rashada in a second. If you want to still argue he has that we can see. But it was going to be tough, right? The guy where it's one last ride, well, that's going to be tough because those guys know that their career's about over. I want to go someplace I can close out my career playing. Young talent, those guys look at Kamario Taylor and would say, well, why would I go there when he's going to be the guy for the next 3 years or so? So it was going to be kind of slim pickings. A.J. Swan was the exact type of player that we looked at, and we pointed him out on this show. I still think it's hilarious that I was going live on the show, just, all right, who are the quarterbacks in the portal? It's like, oh, A.J. Swan. Like, that's a guy, I'm not saying it's going to be A.J. Swan, but that's the type of guy that I see State going after. They end up getting A.J. Swan. If you had to turn to him and you put him into a game, I think he is someone who can manage the game. Be a game manager, but, that's fine. Is he going to give you anything from an athleticism standpoint? No, not really. Is he crazy talented as a passer? Not really. Do you think he can go in and if you had to start him a game, could he keep the ship afloat and do what he is asked to in the offense? I think that's possible, which is ultimately what you are looking for out of your backup quarterback. The fact you are not having to turn it over to a young guy who's not been in that spot before is beneficial for you. The fact that you are able to get a guy who has gotten the game action and will have done it all before, that's about as good as you can ask for. And he can also be someone Kamario can lean on a little bit. And like Kamario can okay, how'd you handle this? How'd you handle this? Like he can give him some advice here or there on navigating the waters as a quarterback in college football in the SEC. So it's a good voice to have in the room, a good piece. Jaden Rashada gives you the higher upside option where, look, at this point, it's hard to call Rashada anything other than a bust. I don't put it all on him the way things have played out. Obviously, getting injured at Arizona State did not help matters for him at all. Doesn't beat out Sam Leavitt. I guess I don't remember when he transferred out at that point, but I guess kind of felt it was going to be best to go. The coaching staff was ready to go in another direction. They brought Leavitt in. He showed some flashes, though, as a true freshman at Arizona State when he was healthy. Obviously, takes the redshirt year at Georgia. Sac State did not work out for him. He didn't play well, lost the job, also was battling an injury. And I think he feels more like a bust because of the NIL side of it, that he was one of the first big NIL stories in college football that, he flips from Miami to Florida for this $9.5 million deal that doesn't come through and then hits the portal because gets released of his letter of intent and hits the portal because of that. And anytime you have a move like that, you're a high-profile quarterback coming out and money is what's being discussed, you're not going to be a popular figure in the eyes of the college football public. And then you had the lawsuit against Billy Napier. The fact of the matter is he's a guy that was still very talented coming out of high school that Jeff Lebby thought very highly of. Tried to recruit him on multiple occasions. As I've said before, he's not a great athlete. It's not like you're talking about a guy that could step in and run the same offense that you're going to run with Kamario. But is he a guy that you could do a few design QB runs with, could ask to scramble every now and then and give you more than you're going to get out of AJ Swan? Yes. Does he have more arm talent than you're getting out of AJ Swan? Yes. He has the ability to make the throws that you want to see. If he comes in and could settle in and have a big spring, and I'm going to be very interested to watch him in the spring because of that, maybe you see something there. And no, he's not coming in to compete for the job. It is Kamario Taylor's job through and through. But if Kamario goes down and you had to turn it over to somebody, maybe Rashada shows you something this offseason that makes you think he's still got something. He still has some ability. The fact that you've given yourself that option where there's still some upside at a backup quarterback spot, and he's got some experience. Again, he made 3 starts at Arizona State. He's been in college football going into his 4th year now. I think only got 1 or 2 starts at Sac State. So it's not like you're talking about a guy with extensive game experience, but he's played some and he's been around college football a long enough time at this point. You think he could handle some of the pressure of that. It's another good addition to the room. Give yourself some options. Last guy, Brody McWhorter comes in as a true freshman, 3-star prospect, bunch of offers coming out. I know, West Virginia, Auburn, with sort of the other schools you were hearing about with his recruitment. Plenty of talent. The kid can move. The kid, I wouldn't say he's like a special arm, but he can make the throws that you need him to, but a good athlete and a guy who is clearly projected as a power conference level quarterback moving forward. Is he ever going to be the guy at Mississippi State long term? I guess you should never say never, because I think we assume it's going to be Kamario. You never know what's going to happen in college football. His chances are probably pretty slim, but if that's your number 4 quarterback on the roster going into this year, that's a great place to be in. And the way I look at it is, like Michael Van Buren was a higher profile player coming out, but Van Buren wasn't like super high, more highly rated. I could be speaking completely off base there. I don't know where they were ranked nationally, but I believe they were both similar prospects from an overall 3-star. Van Buren had a 4-star by some metrics. I think Rivals gave McWhorter a 4-star though. So they were similar profile quarterbacks coming out. And you had to play Van Buren as a true freshman. And he played well. He handled that fine. You didn't want to have to do that. You've given yourself the ability to not have to do that this year. You gave yourself the option to not have to do it last year, just the true freshman was so talented that that's what you wanted to do when you went away from Blake. But having more veteran guys in the room is the best thing. So, look, I think State's put together a good room here. Obviously, Kamario has the ability to be one of the top QBs in the conference. Where does the room rank? Just looking at here, College Football News actually put him as the number 4 room, number 5 room in the SEC, which – that was before they knew Trinidad was coming back. So I guess you would have him 6th. I don't know that I would have him that high. I do think there's other rooms with higher upside. But there is a good mix that State has between super high ceiling, super talented young guy, solid, steady veteran, intriguing backup option, decent young freshman. This is a good quarterback room. It's a well-rounded quarterback room. It's frankly probably on par with where you were at last year in terms of the overall talent, if not a little bit better with some of the guys that you've brought in. So Lebby's done a good job with this group. You got a good group at quarterback. I feel confident Mississippi State's going to get better quarterback play going into next season.